All right, welcome to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. As you know, and as we announced last week, this is a series on getting you right for fall deer season. So some of you follow us for probably a very limited amount of you follow us for the information that me and Jared will provide because it's usually pretty low. Usually it's kind of for the entertainment and for, the mishaps, but we do bring in solid people who know a lot more than us. And so the intent of this series is to find people who know a whole bunch about certain things and pick their brains on certain ways that you should be getting yourself right for the season. So like we mentioned, we'll talk gear, tactics, and everything else. But what we're doing this week is actually kicking off with something that might sound a little strange to people when it comes to getting right for deer season specifically. So I've got Todd Bumgardner back on. We recorded an episode that went live a few weeks ago. Had such a good time, and I've been using your program since for a while now, and have enjoyed it. So we thought we'd bring you back to pick your brain on physical training and prep for whitetail season. So before we dive into that, Todd, you want to give us a recap of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, man. Sure. So I am a career-long strength and conditioning coach. I've been doing this for 17 years. Worked in all kinds of facets. So right now I own a gym in Northern Virginia called Beyond Strength. Our whole goal is to help people play harder. So go out. It's not like gym people, where it's not like we're pumping biceps and looking ourselves in the mirror. We have like active people that like to hike and hunt and do the things that, you and I like to do. And so I have a gym that we do that. I have Predator Pack Mule, which you were just mentioning, which is fitness for backcountry and mountain hunting and hunting in general. Our whole goal is to train smarter so you can hunt longer. So we get you ready for this season and then every other season that you'd like to hunt. And we know if we take care of our bodies the right way now, we can do this well into old age. And then I'm also a strength and conditioning coach, human performance coach for a tier 1 group. And I work with the folks in the qualification course on that. So it's a pretty neat gig. And I've been doing that for 7 years too. And like everybody that listens to this, I'm a hunter. I grew up hunting and started honestly with whitetail deer. Like that's where I really started to learn how to hunt in Pennsylvania. And so I think it's fun that we're talking about whitetail fit.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think there is a dude out there that is called Whitetail
Fit. I think. Yeah, I think I see it too.
It seems like maybe the training he does is slightly different than some of the things that I would imagine you do. But you mentioned you're kind of comparing like your traditional like going to the gym and doing curls to some of the stuff that you do. So like,
sure.
So okay, you have curls on this side. Like, what are you doing instead? What are the types of movements that you focus on?
I mean, so when it comes to movements, you really just, it's not that there's this a big complication there. So what it really is, it's how do you apply the movements? So every solid strength and conditioning program is going to be built around a handful of things. So you're going to hinge, which is a deadlift. Mm-hmm. You're going to squat. You're going to push with your upper body. You're going to pull with your upper body, and you're going to carry stuff. And really, every program's built around that. But then you just have to look at the goals. And so then it's how do you apply these movements, and then which variations of those movements are right for you. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So it's like, yeah, do we do curls and stuff sometimes? Sure. Yeah. But it just depends on the time of the year and what the focus is and what we're trying to accomplish. And so the movements don't change all that much. It's just really how you apply them.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. We're going to take a few seconds here to thank a few sponsors that helped make this show possible.
We are big fans of having glass with you when you're in the woods. So whether we're turkey hunting, bear hunting, deer hunting, whatever we're doing, we're bringing some sort of glass. Actually, one of the new fun pieces of glass that we've added to our collection were the UHD 18x56s.
Big boys.
I like them because then you don't need to bring a full spotter, and you can still do pretty well. Yeah. I like the 2 eyes. So we love Vortex. We use a lot of their optics on our rifles, on our chest when we're out.
Rangefinders. They got
rangefinders. Amazing. So we'll love them. Go check them out. And actually, if you're going to buy some, check out Midway USA and use the promo code TFC10 for 10% off your order. I promise you won't be disappointed. Go check them out, Vortex Optics.
HuntWise is an awesome app. There's a lot of them out there. This one's definitely our favorite. They're local here in Grand Rapids, have their headquarters here. They have an awesome HuntCast 2.0 that's going to give you weather prediction, wind prediction, anything based off the pin and property that you're hunting to give you the best day to get out there and hunt. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Go get this app, huntwise.com.
It's no secret we've been shooting method arrows for a long time. Well, it might be because they used to be called vector arrows. Their method arrows now are super tough, great shooting arrows, great weight. And what's really cool about them is you enter your bow specs in, weight, draw length, all that stuff, and they will send
No more charts.
No more.
Let them deal with it.
The smart dudes who we've had on our show in the past figure it out for you, send you ready to go arrows,
ready to shoot.
Go check them out. Method Archery. We've shot a lot of bows, but for the past 5 or so years, we've been shooting prime bows. Love the way they shoot, super stable. And what we're really excited about, great warranty. And this year they rolled out the RevX series, which is pretty sweet. We've been talking about the different RevXs we're going to be shooting.
And you're going in the 6Y?
I'm deciding to shoot the 36, which is a
the
longer
only
axis,
reason he's choosing the 36
is because I figure the bigger the bow, the bigger the buck. So we're going to test that out. Follow us this year to see if that actually happens. But that's what I'm shooting. You're shooting the RevX 4. Yep. So anyways, we love Prime. Michigan company. Great guys. Go check them out. G5prime.com. We put a lot of miles on whether we're hunting.
Boots.
Yeah, on our boots. Whether it's Alaska out west, even here in Michigan.
Let's just say the muck boots were left in the truck.
Yes. So we need something that's comfortable, that'll keep us dry, that's durable, and actually we like a little stiffer soled when we're hunting from our platform when we're saddle hunting. So we wear Lathrop & Son boots. I've been wearing the Mountain Hunter Encompass, and yours is the
Mountain Hunter Elite.
Great boots. Great guys from down in Illinois, the Lathrop brothers. Had them on an episode in the past. Go check it out. Go check out their boots, Lathrop & Sons.
If you didn't already know that James and I are saddle hunters, then you do now. And if you don't like it, then go listen to somebody else because we're going to talk about saddles. We wear Trophy Line tree saddles because we think they're awesome. And they come out with some awesome new products all the time. They just came out with the new Venatic saddle that is seriously the best saddle I've ever sat in. And I've sat in quite a bit of them. They also have the new Onyx platform out.
I spent some time on it this fall.
I've spent some time on it. It's pretty sweet. And they're going to continue to come out with sweet products just like those two. So stay tuned to them. They've got social media, trophyline.com. And save yourself 10%. TFC 10.
It's no use having an awesome bow if you don't have great accessories. So sights, stabilizers, things like that. And so that's why we chose to work with Redline Bow Accessories. And so those guys are coming out with amazing new things, whether it be new stabilizers or sights like this. If you're watching on our YouTube or video podcast, this new torch sight. So we're huge fans of this sight. Double pin. You know what? Go check out our past episode with them or check out their website. There's a ton to like about this site. Their stabilizers are great, and actually some of their quivers are incredible.
Yes.
So go check them out. Listen to the last episode we did with them. Oh, and save yourself 10% with the code TFC10.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I love it. Like I was telling you, I've been doing it, and after the first workout, just how great my hips felt. You know, I've played a lot of sports growing up, got a lot of tightness in my hips, a lot of running, and so just to walk away and being like, it's a weird free feeling that I have not felt in a long time.
Good. Well, that's one of the things that people miss on that they need to focus on a lot, and that is something called movement capacity and also called mobility. So how much active range of motion do you have in your joints? And really, spending time working on your mobility of your hips and your mobility of your shoulders, the mobility of your ankles, like it pays such big dividends for, how you feel, like you're talking about, but also moving efficiently, which means that if you move efficiently, it'll cost you less energy, so you don't fatigue as quickly, but then also longevity. Because the better your joints move, the healthier they remain.
Yeah, and the key is, the goal, at least for me, is like, how do I hunt into my 80s
Exactly
in the
right. Yeah, man.
backcountry, you know, like how do I
Yeah,
get
dude.
there? And I never thought about it until I hit like my 30s. And then I started
No.
thinking like, oh, easy, Jim, steady, like take it easy on your body, man.
Well, yeah. Well, you think you're invincible until you're 30. You know what I mean? Which is
Yeah.
like, it's not old, but even in your 20s, like you have this vague concept that you'll get old, and then you hit your 30s and like your brain's totally wired together, and you're like, oh no, this is
Yeah,
this is
the synapses finally connect
yeah,
or whatever.
exactly
Yeah.
right. And so I only have so much time, you know,
Yeah.
and it
Holy
doesn't hit you.
cow.
It doesn't hit you till you're in your 30s. So I'm with that for sure, man.
I think I've told the story here before, but one thing that really like drove home the fact that I'm getting old is like as a kid and like even high school and in my 20s, I had like the tube behind a boat. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'd do jumps and I could do all this stuff. Like it was my thing. But I like to do the rolls, like the barrel rolls. And
Yeah.
so last year I was like, I can still do that. You know, like somebody's giving me a hard time because I get, you know, I have dark hair. So you can see the grays come in. I'm like, you know, it's not a problem. Like I'm still just as good as I once was. And so I'm 34 now. And so I did some barrel rolls and I kid you not, my neck because from the water kind of hitting it to the side. It was sore until past opening day, which is October. So July 4th into October, it still hurt. And I was like, so I have said I'll never do a barrel roll again. And I know like in 2 years I'm gonna forget. And I'm not that the synapses haven't totally connected for me
Oh,
yet in my
sure.
brain.
Yeah,
So I'll still probably fall into the trap again. But now at least it stopped me this year. Like I'm not tubing this year. I'm not doing that.
yeah. Well, I think the thing is too, is like, you know, our brains, you know, don't necessarily tell us how old we are. But
Yeah.
dude, I still think like you can make your body feel like you're in your mid 20s,
Yeah.
even when you're in your mid 30s, if you're training correctly.
Yeah.
If you're training right and you have the intensity of your training and the right type of, you're doing the right types of training, like you can maintain your fitness, your health, your longevity, your youth for way longer than people realize, you know.
Agreed. That and food,
Food, yeah,
like
for
cleaning
sure.
up my diet and the types of working out that I've been doing. I feel great. I feel like
Yeah.
18, you know.
Going to sleep too. That's like, go to sleep,
Yes.
get some sleep, man.
You know what's big for that? Being married. Before I was married, I didn't, you know, I've been married now like 13. I looked at my watch, like somehow that's telling me how long I got. But I've been married 13 years. But whenever she leaves or like before getting married, I don't sleep. I like mess around and doing stuff. But like with her, it's like I get a regimented schedule. And so just a plug there for marriage
There you
for
go.
all the listeners. So,
Selling
you know,
marriage.
bringing this back into focus.
Yep.
So you know, like I mentioned at the beginning, whitetail deer hunting and fitness don't traditionally go hand in hand. You think of the guy who's a little hungover or whatever from deer camp the night before, stumbles out with his plaid belly hanging out and goes and, you know, walks, you know, a couple feet off the road, sits in a preset stand and, you know, shoots the first thing they see. Like that's kind of the impression, or that's what people talk about. But I don't necessarily know that I agree with that. And I would assume you don't as well. So like from your perspective, how should like training, especially in the summer, go hand in hand with something like hunting whitetails?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing, you know, I put human as the first word in our training company because that's what we have to think about first, right? And so you have to think about your human abilities from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. So we cover all of that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the physical standpoint, it's like there are certain things that you just need to be able to do as a human. And whether you're hunting whitetails, you're just, you know, or just existing as a person. And so that's what we look at first. And so part of that is the joint mobility stuff that we talk about. Like that's a constant focus. It's developing your aerobic system by doing a lot of low to moderate intensity conditioning, and it's building relative strength. And so that's just looks like regular weightlifting a lot of the times without putting on a bunch of weight, you know? And so that's really for anyone to start with. And if you're doing those things and you're doing them consistently, you're going to be doing really well. But then you have to think about, well, how do I hunt deer? And I think that's the really where it comes to, because you look at what things that people do now, there's a lot of the pushing in deep and the mobile archery hunting with saddles and doing that kind of stuff. And then there's something that I did honestly for the first time last year is I went up to the Adirondacks and did like the traditional tracking deer type hunt in the snow.
Sweet. Yeah,
it's
fun.
cool. Yeah, it's fun. And but you look at the guy's name, was it Benoit? I forget his first name, but anyway, the guy that wrote How to Bag the Biggest Buck of Your Life. And you look at how these
Larry
people,
Benoit and
Larry
Pete
Benoit.
Miller.
That's it. Larry Benoit. That book's awesome. If you
Never read it.
Dude, you can get it for like a handful of bucks on Amazon. It's worth it. It's pretty cool. But him and his son, I mean, they killed monstrous deer up in like Vermont and New York and Maine for years. And people still hunt deer up that way. So it's so interesting. Like for us, we talk about rack size or points or whatever, and folks up there, they talk about how much does the deer weigh, how much does their deer weigh field dress. So like that's their concern, and but they dogged deer through the mountains for however long it took, and there's somebody that still does that's big on that Hal Blood, yeah. And so if you're gonna hunt deer like that, you got to be in really good shape,
Yeah.
So I think it's really coming down to looking at, well, how do I need to cover ground? How am I hunting the deer? And like, well, if you kill a deer a few miles back in, you got to get the deer back out. And so you can't ignore the things that you have to do that. And so I think that's the step number one, is looking at like, how do you hunt deer? First is thinking like of yourself as the basic human abilities that you need. You need you need a good aerobic system. You need to be strong. You need your joints to work well, and you need to do that. And then on top of that, how do I hunt deer? And knowing that if you're hiking back in with all of your archery stuff on your back, killing a deer, and then you got to get it back out, like that's a fair amount of work. And so I think one of the things that people ignore is that, not necessarily ignore, but maybe don't pay as deep attention to as they should, is that you can't just expect yourself to be able to do that well and enjoy it, Yeah. And it's like, if you did a little bit of work dragging that deer out, or if you decide to quarter it and pack it out, will be a lot better for you if you just did a little bit of work to make yourself prepared for it,
Yeah. Well, and you like call out such an important thing. It's like how you're doing it is so critical, because our thing is, typically, since we're hunting so much public land and kind of these big woods areas in our where we live, and north of here, it is a lot of walking. Like sometimes it's pushing through a swamp. And if you've ever put on muck boots and walked half a mile through a swamp, it's like very different than just walking half a mile, and you're done. Like you're tired afterwards. But even things like, I mean, how many guys will be on their walk out to their stand and they'll come upon a deer? Like we have it happen all the time. It's like, oh, all of a sudden this has become kind of a stalk situation.
Yeah.
And so the one thing that's been huge, at least for me personally, as I've trained and changed the way that I've trained from, for a while I was running and things like that to more functional movement, is, man, stalking a deer takes a lot of flexibility to do it well, to stay hidden, to be able to, I mean, think of all the different movements you do, from like push-ups and stuff, holding just your body weight. You're doing a ton of that stuff when you're crawling through the ferns to try to sneak up on a deer in the big woods, or, in a field or whatever. And so just, talking back to hips, like having tight hips and trying to stalk and trying to squat and get low and move it. I had a hard time. It just hurt. It hurt bad to do. And so that's changed huge for me.
It also affects your ability to do it. Like you're not going to be able to move as slowly as you need to and stay quiet, and because you just won't have the control over your body that you need to. And that's a really good point. And that's one of the things that when we were first developing Human Predator Pack Mule, is we looked at like, well, what are the blind spots? And, this isn't necessarily for white-tailed deer hunting, but hunting in general is like, you look at the programs that are mostly out there, and they kind of designed to make you into a stormtrooper, like you can, like you're worried about, they're centered around the people's biggest fears, which is like the pack in, the pack out, being able to go uphill, blah, blah, blah. And you have to account for that stuff.
Sure.
But that's not what finishes the job.
No.
What finishes the job is being able to move slowly, have control of your body, and have the endurance while controlling your body to be able to stay on a stalk, not lose your balance, and be able to get close enough to do the things that you need to do, especially if you're still hunting, or if you're tracking deer, like up in the North Woods kind of deal up there. Like, you have to. And so one of the things that we've done is we put together things like, we call them Predator circuits. And so it's things like crawling slowly, learning how to, like, walking slowly on a balance beam, building in mobility exercises with that teach us to control our bodies, have endurance while we control our bodies, and transfers over to going into the woods. So, like, for example, for some people, it would just be like, go out and practice moving slowly in the woods. That's one of the things that Larry Benoit used to talk about. He said, go out and spend 30 minutes. It should take you 30 minutes to move 200 yards. And that's how you know you're moving slowly enough. And he would go out and practice on hunting partridge with a 22 before deer season.
Funny.
And so, yeah. And so it's a great point that you bring up there. And like, training yourself to move slowly, having the joint range of motion, having the control of your body to overdo it is important, because you think about it, it doesn't seem like it would matter right now, but understanding where to keep weight in your foot matters, right? When you're trying to move slowly. So it's like, you need that weight centered in the middle of your foot, and you need your body weight right over the top of it, because that's where you're going to maintain your balance. And then practicing those kind of steps are going to be the things that bridge the gap between you being on a stalk and being able to get a shot and not being able to get a shot.
Yeah. And I love that. And that's, like I said, it's so true. It's just the way just the difference that it makes in how you move, and how can you move quietly and slowly is huge. My biggest claim to fame lately is that I can touch the floor now. Before I could get halfway down my shins doing a hamstring stretch, and doing things like RDLs and stuff has, I've now when I can squat down or do duck walks, like it's a big part of the program that I've been doing with you guys lately. And just feeling how that opens you up, and suddenly you can stay squatting down much longer. Yeah. Which is huge too, because you're like squatting all the time in the woods. And
and you need endurance in those positions, because think about those instances where you've been down there for so long, and you just kind of edge up against your ability to do that. And then it changes the way that you make decisions.
Yeah. It's like, I'm done with this pose now, I got to move. And then it's like, that changes the whole hunt. Yeah.
And it could blow up for you, because you just couldn't stay there quite long enough,
Yeah. So when you're looking at people, I mean, you train tons of people. Where do you see like the biggest deficiencies in how people move?
I mean, a lot of times it's some of the stuff that we talked about before. It's hip mobility, it's ankle mobility, and it's shoulder mobility. And so that limits like what we would call global movement patterns. So the things like hinging and squatting that we talked about before, it affects their gait. And so from a movement standpoint, those are the things that we most commonly see. And it's brought on by our lifestyle, most of us sit at a desk with our hips and our knees at 90 degrees for most of the day. And we don't ever explore range of motion beyond that. And that has a lot to do with it. And, even just how I know how I'm sitting now in front of this microphone, like I'm hunched, like I'm kind of rounded over. And so if we don't do things it made you sit up.
Now I got to think about it.
Yeah. And so if we don't do things to counteract that, and if our training doesn't have elements that help us restore that mobility and even create greater mobility, that's a big problem. And then the other thing is people just don't have the aerobic base they need. They don't do enough low to moderate intensity aerobic conditioning because you need it as a base of conditioning. It's your recovery system. It's going to help with all of the joint stuff that we're talking about. I mean, it helps with everything, helps with your cognitive processes. and it allows you to layer more difficult conditioning on top of that. And one of the biggest mistakes that we see is that people jump in and they try to do stuff that's conditioning that's way too hard without having the aerobic base that they need to do that conditioning. And so, for example, if you're tracking deer in the mountains, or, if you're pushing way back in on some public and you got your saddle and stuff in tow, and you got to, go through hills and do everything like that, you're going to have a way better time of that if you have the aerobic base to deal with it, because it won't stress your body as much. It won't take as much from you. It won't cost as much. So if you layer some of the relative strength stuff that we've been talking about on top of that, with solid strength training that makes sense, your joints move well, and you have an aerobic base, all of this costs you way less. And so you don't fatigue as quickly. And so that allows you to get to your stand or to your, into your saddle, get up the tree, and spend more time there with more comfort, so it won't weigh on your mind as much, and then you make decisions differently. Like maybe you have, if you set up a little farther in, you can get to a better spot,
right?
Rather than thinking like, well, I don't want to take a deer out that far,
and it just changes there.
Exactly right. It changes the way that you hunt,
I noticed you mentioned cognitive capacity. And so I know, physical preparedness and the way that you think when you're out in the woods is hugely connected, both in, maybe the decisions you make and how you move. But I've noticed it in the moment of truth, or maybe when something steps out, your heart's racing, the ability to almost control your mind more, because you're used to having your heart rate up and doing things. Do you notice that? Is that part of kind of how you approach this too?
Oh, we do a lot of mental skills training. And one of the things that we use is a strength endurance method called eustress training. There's been a bunch of different coaches that have used it and kind of developed it, but I have these colleagues at a company called Building the Elite, Craig Weller and Jonathan Pope, and they train guys for selections for different special operations group. They train guys for the group that I work with. And so they'll get them ready for selection. They go through selection, and then I take over and we do their train up during their qualification course. And so eustress training is great because it requires you to stay calm. The whole, you're looking at something that should be a potential stressor and being able to maintain your calm through it. So for example, you would do relatively heavy deadlifts for a certain amount of reps or a certain amount of time, and you can't let your heart rate get over 150. So you have to choose weight that makes you a little nervous, because it's supposed to be a stressor, right?
Yep.
Do it for 1 to 3 reps. Let your heart rate come down to 160 minus your age. All the while, you have to stay at the bar. You don't get to wander. You don't get to you focus on where's your heart rate. When your heart rate's down to where it goes again, you just go. And it starts to instill this locus of control. And so you focus on the things that you can control, and you let go of the things that you can't control. And it just does wonders for people's stress response. Obviously it makes you a lot fitter in a lot of different ways, but also it just maintaining that stress response. So we build a lot of that stuff into our training, from things like compartmentalization to segmentalization, and all these different mental skills are built into different aspects of our training program, so that you just have better control of your mind. Not only does the fitness help you do that, just because your brain gets more blood and more oxygen, and your brain works better then, but also layering these skills on top of it. Because it's you hear things just like, well, just tough it out, or I'll just tough it out. It's you don't do that. You got to have a skill that allows you to stay in the moment and do the thing. Exactly right. Yeah.
It's a thing you earned. You don't just pull out of nowhere when you want to use it. So you don't have to do any prep ahead of time for it.
Right.
It's I'll just tough it out. It's you have to, that's withdrawal from somewhere that you haven't put anything into to
exactly
take out
right.
from.
Exactly.
Well, and
right.
I've noticed even, I've always had, not always, but in the last couple of years struggled with some different target panic things.
Sure.
And honestly, sometimes some of these, I don't know if it's the exercise or how it ties to it, but lately it's just been less. I've been able to, because people who have target panic know it's you're going to shoot, and all of a sudden your heart starts to race a little faster, and your brain doesn't think right, and you can't get your pin on target. And for whatever reason, I've even started just doing, I'd shoot 1 arrow, jog, shoot 1 arrow, jog to grab it back and forth just to keep my heart rate elevated to practice that way. And it actually has helped me kind of control my mind better. So
Good.
I don't know what the science is behind that, but it has helped me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a sweet spot with your heart rate and attention and focus. And so it could be partially that. One of the things that like, I think that sometimes people can overdo that. Like they'll go and crush themselves with burpees and then try to shoot just to elevate and be able to, but it's like, that doesn't really simulate the moment as well as I think a lot of people think it does, because first of all, if you're that fatigued to get into position should you take the shot?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I would argue no.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. And then the second thing is like, that's not what elevates your heart rate in those situations. It's not the exercise a lot of the times. It is the situation. It's the circumstance. And so, from my understanding of how it works, like neurologically, you need a stressor from a different way. So like whether it's a timing thing, whether it's a social thing, something that simulates that kind of elevation in heart rate from a threat like that, rather than trying to elevate it through exercise. So what you're doing with a moderate amount of it, just to kind of get your heart rate in the right zone, I think that that's a good thing. But I think one of the things that people should avoid is like crushing themselves with an exercise and then going and trying to shoot. Like, I think that's a very bad idea. You're just going to develop bad habits.
Man, you mentioned a really interesting, and this is kind of from my day job, but yeah, moderate stress levels actually can sharpen your focus. You can be focused longer. You're actually strengthening the connections between the neurons in your brain. When you're a little stressed, not when you're max stressed, or not when you're laying on the couch like that. There's a sweet spot in there. So with this in mind, what are some of your favorite, what are like kind of your go-to types of movements that you'd recommend for guys that are just trying to get themselves ready for deer season? And based on some of the things we said, like what are maybe 3 movements you'd recommend someone check out as they prepare for the fall?
Yeah, I mean, you need something to generally be strong. So systemic strength. So some people are built better to squat. Some people are built better to deadlift. I think they can be used interchangeably, but some kind of strength movement like that builds like your big base of full body strength, I think is a very important thing. From there, as far as a fitness, I would layer on some type of aerobic development. And so for the most specific thing that you could probably do right now is go out and hike or ruck. And as you do that, keep your heart rate, under 150 generally. Somewhere between 100 and 150 is about where you want to be. You don't need to crush yourself. Keep it there on average. If you're new to rucking, like you've never really done it, a lot of times 10% of your body weight is a good place to start, and start on no terrain. And just see how you get accustomed to managing your heart rate at that place. Then you can start to add some terrain, see what your heart rate does. Then you can start to add some more weight. But the biggest thing for us right now, especially if you're someone that's going to hike back into the big woods, or if you're somebody that's going to track deer or still hunt deer, being on your feet this time of year is going to be the best thing for you. And then from there, it's the stuff that we've been talking about, is work on your hip mobility, work on your shoulder mobility, work on your ankle mobility, and your spinal mobility too. And for the reasons of, if your shoulders are moving well and your spine's moving well, especially if you're an archery hunter, like that's what's going to keep you healthy from shooting your bow, because it's a repetitive motion, and that's where you end up with a lot of overuse injuries and stuff like that. So making sure that you maintain your mobility there is going to be huge. And the other stuff is just, general human health stuff. We need our hips to move better. We need our ankles to move as well as possible. But then also what that does for us is it helps us stay in the stand for longer if we need to, because if our joints are healthy and they feel good, you're going to be more comfortable. And so the more comfortable you are in your stand, obviously there's different setups and things like that you need to figure out work for you. But if you take it back from a general standpoint, if your joints are moving better, if they feel healthy, you're going to be able to stay in your stand for longer.
Sorry, hit mute there. No, I like that a lot. That's those are the big things that I think are so important. And they help, not even for this season, but for the future. And I always say too, it's like you should always be training, because you never know when that hunt out
Absolutely.
west pops up, you get a leftover tag or something, and it's like, man, maybe you're like, just be ready always. So
Yeah.
you should always be ready, and
Oh,
especially like general Americans should probably get better at that. Like,
oh yeah.
be ready.
Yeah. Dude, and it's not even just, yes, be ready, because you never, like, that's happened to me. Like, I was training for I was planning on going to hunt elk in the fall, and I get a call in May, and it's like, hey, do you want to come to Alaska to hunt bears? And I'm like, absolutely, I do.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
you
right.
just you don't really question whether or not you're ready to do it, because you know your body's ready. But another thing is just like, it's like cliched and people say it all the time, but it's like the best way to get in shape is to never get out of shape. And
Exactly.
so, and from a health outcome, from an enjoyment of your life, from like all of the research that's coming out on longevity and fighting chronic disease and everything, like, exercise is the cornucopia. So if you're just consistently training, everything about your life will be better, and you'll have more opportunities when it comes to hunting.
Well, I was even reading, and I'm not suggesting this, but it was like people that smoke, people that drink more excessively, like if they exercise like once a day, like their risk of getting sick later on is like much lower,
Oh,
even better
absolutely.
sometimes than people who don't do those things and don't really work out.
Absolutely, dude.
The
Absolutely.
the other thing that I had seen, and this has kind of been stuck in my craw for a while, is it was this study done, I think by the DoD, like 80% of kids between, I think, 17 and like 24 are physically unfit now
Yeah.
for
For
military
military
service,
service. Yeah.
which is, I mean, that's a security issue, national security issue,
Yeah, man.
like,
Yeah.
and so like there's, I mean, this is important for hunting, but just like there's a patriotic duty almost to just be in shape, like
Oh yeah.
do your part, and I'll plug, eat more healthy than you do. Like, just because it's deer season, you don't need to eat like crap. You'll just be sitting in the woods and farting
Yeah.
and blowing out deer. So like, why would you feel like you could I mean, you do all these things to be scent free, you eat some sort of like bear claw on the way in, and you blow ass the rest of the time.
Oh,
Like,
dude. Yeah.
so weird.
And it just takes, but that's the thing too, is like, look at how you break down your preparation, right? So maybe you're big into scouting, like you've scouted all summer, you've lifted, you've trained all summer, you've checked your cameras, you've done all the things that you need to do. It's like you've done all of this level of preparation for deer. Your nutrition and the way that you take care of your body is just a part of the preparation.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't take that much time to put together maybe a little bit better of food to take into the woods with you, you
Right.
know, because it's going to sustain your energy too. Because like if you eat a bear claw or whatever in the woods, or like, you're going to have a big energy crash, and then you're going to get uncomfortable, and you're going to be like, well, I don't know. And like, you're going to have brain fog, and you won't have the same focus that you otherwise would if maybe you had, Jesus, even some beef jerky, an apple, and a half a
Right.
handful of nuts or something like that.
Cup of
Like,
coffee instead of
yeah.
the Monster Energy drink.
Exactly right.
Exactly
Exactly right, dude. 1,000,000%. Yep.
Although a couple of my buddies, I think in deer season, live on chew and monsters.
Dude,
I think that's literally how they get through. I won't name names, but if he here, for everybody listening, like I said, physical preparedness. I mean, be ready for this fall. Be ready for things that can come up. Staying in shape is going to help you stalk. It's going to help you get farther back. You'll be able to stay more comfortable. You'll be able to execute better in the moment of truth. Your mind will work better. Tons of really important things. And Todd, like, you offer actually something really a great resource for folks that want to start doing this. I've been using it, and I'm a huge fan. And so, for people that have listened to this and maybe want to up their game going into the fall, like, maybe how could they get a hold of you or find some good direction?
Yeah. So the easiest thing to do would just be to go to humanpredatorpackmule.com. We have a bunch of free resources there. We have a blog that we update weekly. It lays out all of our programs, how they work, and you can find the one that works for you. And then if you just have general questions, we have a contact form on there, and you can shoot me a note, and I'm pretty fast on getting back to people.
Wonderful. Well, everybody, thanks for listening in. Todd, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it
Yeah,
as
man.
always. And we'll keep having you on to share different physical pointers and everything else. So thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks, James. Really good, man.